Make sure to subscribe to the Volume YouTube channel so you can catch all of our shows and get what everybody wants, more of me. I want to throw this at you, and I addressed this early, and I said, the Niners are going to upset somebody. They're physical everywhere, including wide receiver. They're going to beat somebody. It's going to be Rams, Packers, Dallas. Dallas they match up really well against. Here's the thing. So the Niners special teams aren't very good. The defense is good, but Kyle doesn't get credit for that. And I like Kyle Shanahan. Yeah. And the offense is only good if Jimmy G plays. And I'm sitting there thinking, Aaron Rodgers is one of the great quarterback talents of all time and sat for 3 years. If Garoppolo gets him into the playoffs and wins a game, he opens camp as the guy. He's tight with that team. He's a good-looking guy, right? He's a guy's guy. You tell me, Trey Lance will have not taken a snap in more than one game in 2.5 years by next year's camp. What do you do with that situation? I don't think I'd trade him. I think you could get something for him. I don't think I'd move him.
First of all, I take issue with you saying that Jimmy Garoppolo is good looking. He is exceptional looking. He is by far the best looking man ever to wear a football uniform, if not inhabit the earth. And I say that as someone who is happily married like you to a woman, not that it matters. I'm just saying Jimmy Garoppolo is that. Don't insult him. I would say this. First of all, these are the Niners that I expected all year. And I went to that game at Levi's when they came out lifeless against Colt McCoy and DeAndre Hopkins and looked dead in the water, and it was over. And then they beat the Rams and resuscitated themselves. But I don't think they're just a curiosity who's going to be tough in the playoffs. I think when they're rolling like this, they are a legit threat to win the NFC and the whole thing. It's going to be a harder road, but it's there. We've seen the good problem to have scenario a few times in football history. Rodgers and Favre, Phillip Rivers and Breeze. This is funny because you'll remember this and most people don't. So the Chargers get Rivers in the first round in the Eli Manning trade after the draft, and he's the guy. And Breeze is starting that next year in his second year, and it's not looking good. And then Breeze, they actually had to recover an onside kick for Breeze to pull out a game to kind of stay in, and then Breeze got hot. Well, now year 3, Breeze is Breeze, and it's crazy. And they're still planning to trade Drew Brees after that third season. They're not going to make the playoffs. And they have one more game that was meaningless. And normally in that game, you would have put Phillip Rivers out there to see what you got in year 3.
Yes.
They did not do it because they were going to, they were going to trade Phillip Rivers, not Drew Brees, because Brees had proven it. So they were going to say, fine, we'll trade Phillip Rivers. They didn't put him out there because they didn't want to jeopardize they didn't want him to get hurt and then you can't trade him. Drew Brees then suffered a ruinous shoulder injury. It ruined the whole thing. So then they had to trade Drew Brees. He ended up, of course, being fine. And then that paved the way for Phillip Rivers. Yep. So we've seen these good problems before. Jimmy Garoppolo winning the Super Bowl with the 49ers this year would be a great problem to have. I still think if you traded that much to get a guy. Now, when Kyle made that trade, he might not have known that it was for Trey Lance, separate subject. I think he thought it was for Mac Jones. But be that as it may, you've invested that much, and he's that athletic and intelligent. It seems to me that you are still looking to make that move. Yeah. But you're right. Jimmy's exceptionally popular in that locker room, and even winning one playoff game points toward keeping him. They could win more than one.
So you've always been a little bit of a skeptic on the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
And you have very good sources inside that room. I have one source, and the question about Kyler has never been, is he gifted enough? But they brought in some veterans because they did worry about leadership. Kyler's not necessarily a good hang with all the guys. He can be kind of his own guy, right? I mean, he's a baseball guy before he was a football guy. And, I said this last week. I don't love his body language. I don't. Aaron, sometimes I'm critical of it, the eye rolling, but sometimes with Kyler, it's like dramatic. Players see that and they don't appreciate it, right? And I do wonder a little bit. I wonder when I watch that offense. You tell me, Mike, you have good sources on this. I wonder if they're unraveling a little bit in Arizona.
Okay, so yeah, one reason I was skeptical of the Cardinals this year, and I clearly got that wrong for most of the season at least, is that I knew that there was a lot of pressure on that team. While most of us, I think, looked at last year, and remember, we were not around because of COVID, so our reporting was not what it should have been. But most of us kind of looked at them last year, kind of like the Dolphins, like, wow, they're doing pretty well. They didn't make the playoffs, but they were right there at the end, and it's promising, and they're going to really have a chance next year to take a step. Owner Michael Bidwell did not look at it that way. He looked at it like, we should have closed and made the playoffs. You guys all screwed it up. You're all on blast. And that certainly included Cliff Kingsbury. And so I thought that combined with some of the things you said about Kyler, not necessarily your classic, guy who galvanizes the locker room and is a leader yet, that it could go really bad. But then I had it wrong, obviously. They lost to the Rams. It's funny. So I'm writing my 32 questions column, which I did for years at Yahoo and later at NFL.com. I'm doing it for Bally Sports now. And my lead last week was quoting Kurt Warner, who, thank you for mentioning in the intro, we co-wrote a book, and 21 years later, it's now a movie, American Underdog. Went to a premiere at Chinese Theater last week. It's surreal. But he's very smart about football, and he took each of those franchises to the Super Bowl. So I thought I'd ask him the morning after Rams Cardinals, what'd you think? Because I think a lot of us saw that and thought, wow, that could be a real turning point. The Rams could take over. His quotes, and you can read it on Bally Sports, he basically said, the Rams still worry me. Stafford still worries me. I think the real Stafford could surface. And the Cardinals don't worry me that much because I've seen them lose twice at home to the Packers and to the Rams. And he said in both times they didn't play well at all, and they were right there. They can get back into it so quickly. I'm not worried. I think they're, they'll be right there in the playoffs. But I think I'd love to talk to Kurt again, and I probably will, because that's not what happened to Detroit. And in fairness, that's not what happened against the Panthers a little while back either. And that's two bad losses. And did you happen to notice who they play next? Because it's not a great thing for them. I believe their next game is against the Indianapolis Colts. And the Colts may have to throw for more than 58 yards in that one. But that's not a great next opponent right now after what we have seen recently.
Let's go back to Thursday. When Frank Reich and Chris Ballard rolled the dice on Carson Wentz, I was a big advocate. I came out and I just said, listen, the kid is a 6'5", super athlete. There's a lot of similarities to Andrew Luck. He's a little reckless, but he's a tough kid. Guys like him. He's going to lose you a couple games. He's going to do a Sam Darnold and make a throw that's just completely non-redeemable. But I will say this. We've paid attention to the Stafford acquisition. This Colts team is the Niners of the AFC. I feel like they're going to beat somebody, Mike, in the playoffs first round. They're going to knock somebody off.
I'll tell you, teams will not want to play him, first of all. And I am not as high on Wentz. I believe that because, you know how everyone gives the Colts a hard time for hanging the banners that say made it to the AFC Championship game?
Right.
The equivalent of that is there should be all the Carson Wentz supporters, and maybe you are included, should have a banner that says, could have been MVP in 2017 if he didn't get hurt, asterisk, and his backup then went on to win the Super Bowl. I feel like we're living a little bit in the past on that. Now, he was a broken guy, but I did feel that Frank Reich, who knows him so well and is so good at those situations, could coax him back. But I think, to me, if you told me Carson Wentz is going to have to carry the Colts to a playoff win, I'm kind of like, but they, Jonathan Taylor can run that thing. They've got Buckner, Leonard, that middle,
yes,
those guys in the middle. They've got some real foundational players in the middle of that team.
Wentz and Garoppolo can win you games. We probably don't trust either in the play of the game, which is why they're not Super Bowl teams. but they play a physical style. We respect their offensive coaches, and I think we both think the Niners and the Colts will win a playoff game. And I kind of feel they're the same.
Yeah.
Garoppolo makes me nervous.
But I think Garoppolo, who I've seen be within half a quarter of a Super Bowl championship with that team, I think they could go further. But, I guess the Colts could too.
So, one of the things that got the NBA in trouble was, they had certain political leanings, which I may agree with, but then it looked like they were selling their soul, LeBron and the league, on China. The NFL has been kind of conservative leaning, pro-business, capitalists morning to night my entire life. Sure. I've always felt the shield over everything. So I'm not bothered by them moving games. I'm not bothered by the NFL saying, listen, it appears to be a slightly weaker variant.
Yeah.
The stronger variant was not punitive to any of our players. We're just going to move these games and get the games in. And you can say we're changing protocol. Okay, we want the games to be played. We don't want to cancel games. I'm comfortable with what they're doing. Some in the media are not, because I feel like they've always been, in my lifetime, we're doing whatever's best for business. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I don't love it. So some background on me, though I may have strong lefty political leanings, oddly enough, when it comes to the NFL and business, I am super like Adam Smith, free market. Like, I remember the old Politburo bosses who used to share everything and never innovate or market. And I was with Eddie DeBarlo and Jerry Jones and Robert Kraft and the new guard of owners who were like, nah, we're going to aggressively try to generate revenue and not just sit there and take our free bread. And we're going to try to grow this thing. So, and that was before I worked at NFL Network for 8 years. But my leanings on the NFL tend to be very in line with that. Like, it's a business, get over it. I don't love this, and there are a couple of complaints I have. The optics competitively are weird, and I understand that it's going to be weird either way. But, first of all, you got Raiders-Browns, and you've got J.C. Treader in his high-up position at the Union, who has a conflict of interest, doesn't recuse himself at the very least, and gets the Browns game moved back in a way that helps the Browns. I'm not one of those, I'm not like a Raider fan who's like, it's always against us, but you can understand the frustration there. I really understand the frustration of the Seahawks and the Eagles, whose games were moved back, and now their players, especially the Seahawks, are testing positive in the meantime, while the Rams players and the Washington players are getting back on the list. So it's going to be a competitive disadvantage if it keeps trending this way for the Seahawks and the Eagles, relative to the other team. And then, of course, there's what happens the next week. I get it. We're in a pandemic. I got it last year. I'm not averse to the concept of games being moved and getting the games in. What I don't like in general is that the NFL is basically going from an orientation, at least presentation-wise, that this is a pandemic, it's spreading, we need to try to deal with it, and we've got protocols in place to try to help mitigate that. And now they're just going, everyone's getting it, we don't care. And it almost reminds me of the, if we stop testing, there'll be fewer cases weirdness. So I guess I would say this. It's easy for people on the outside to just go, well, come on, they're not going to get that sick from it. And, it's spreading and that's what it is. But, these are players who may live with immunocompromised people. They may have parents who are old. And we also, as a society, we have a responsibility to at least try to not blatantly spread it. I understand businesses are going to try to stay open. I understand it's complicated. Optics wise, I didn't love the just, we're having a problem now getting games in. So let's just change the protocol so that we don't know about it. And
plug your ears.
And also people who say, why can't asymptomatic players play? It's outside or it's a dome with good ventilation. Like, open your mind for a second. There's locker rooms, there's buses, there's, it's going to spread. And so the NFL has basically said everyone's getting it. And I hope it'll be okay. Someone's grandma or someone's mom or someone's immunocompromised, brother is probably going to take it on the chin in a way that he or she wouldn't have. And I don't like it.
So I said this before, is that most of the NFL was rooting against Urban Meyer. Most NFL people look at college football as sort of JV football. We saw Spurrier flame out. Lou Holtz, like Urban Meyer, quit. Bobby Petrino quit. Most of these guys don't work. Pete Carroll had an NFL history before college. Jimmy Johnson, even though he hadn't been to the NFL, had gone to camps, wanted to be an NFL guy. Urban had told me.
Harbaugh was really an NFL guy. Yeah.
So Urban told me a year before he took the job, he goes, I never even watched the NFL. And I remember telling one of my bosses at Fox, I'm like, when I heard rumors he would go to the NFL, I'm like, he doesn't have any contacts. Like, you got to have contacts. So I thought Jacksonville was the perfect place for him. If he was going to succeed, it's a college town. I'm like, this is perfect. He's got a fan base built in. He's got Trevor Lawrence. It's a goofy division. There's no dominant quarterback. And then it just unraveled. Are you surprised? His mistakes were so collegiate and so dumb. The Iowa strength coach, Tebow. Like, you're probably not surprised by any of it.
Well, I'm surprised by the just complete train wreck element of it. And the mistakes were collegiate, but they were arrogant. And so I would say, I think people in the media and people in the business are, you say rooting for. I think our guards are up for different reasons. I think in the media, we say these people are used to being emperor. And it's the same thing I think media people think when a Belichick disciple who thinks if you just act like Bill, you will win comes in. It's the same. It's famously Nick Saban, while he was at the Dolphins, one morning came in and a woman who worked outside of football saw him and said, "Oh, your hair looks good, coach." He had gotten a haircut. A memo went out later that day that said, "You are not to speak to Coach Saban unless he addresses you first, unless you're in football." So it's that sense that these guys are so used to being in charge and they just can't handle the heat, whether it's media questioning or, "Hey, your hair looks good." So that's one side of it. And Urban, that certainly seemed to apply to him. But I think coaches and personnel people and people in the business, and this goes back to what you talked about, their guards are up for other reasons. Now, when Tebow Mania was happening in the NFL, I remember a very respected personnel guy in the NFL, one of the top GMs at the time, called me and said, "You see this Urban Meyer quote?" And I said, "Huh?" And he said, "He just said that the reason Tim Tebow hasn't succeeded in the NFL is that nobody has understood how to use him." And he was like, "Really? You really think you know how to use Tim Tebow, but no one in the NFL, these coaches, has figured it out?" And this might have been after Tebow Mania when he was washing out or before. And so I think there's also that whole, he doesn't have any contacts. He doesn't really watch the NFL, but he came in thinking like, I mean, how hard could it be? And I think Spurrier had a little element of that. Like Harbaugh.
By the way, Charlie Weiss from the NFL to college had that at Notre Dame.
Right. And Harbaugh knew how hard it was because he was Captain Comeback and understood it. So I think, that's part of what you saw. And from what I reported in early October and what I was told is that he came in that building disparaging other coaches, the players, the NFL in general, ripping the league. And so I think you add that to the bucket. But with all of that said, I'm surprised. The guy won a ton of games. He was a really good coach at Utah. He was a champion coach at Florida and Ohio State. And, you would think that you would at least take a team with Trevor Lawrence and, some enthusiasm and some accomplished coaches on that staff and make them a little more competitive.